should you be an apologist? Tim Barnett wants you to be, and he's going to pull out the big guns to convince you that you have no choice. But he's got an agenda, as we all know that he does. What is that agenda, and how does he go after his religious audience? Stay tuned, we're going to find out, coming up next. Hey, here's a shocker. STR wants you to be an apologist. You know, the people who make a living selling books and courses and pushing an agenda, they want you to fall for it. Who could have predicted that? Certainly not I, for I am not a skeptic. Oh, wait a minute. That's wrong. I am. So I'm going to point out all of the places that Tim Barnett makes a complete fool of himself and goes right off the rational rails. And that starts pretty much from the very beginning. So let's go take a look. It's why these people just don't talk to the non-religious.
Some days, I wish I had a normal job.
So today, we're back to take on part 2 of Tim's Why Apologetics series. And the first part was so laughable that I thought we had to come back for this. And I don't expect this one to be any better. But of course, we have to give him a chance, right? Who knows? He might make an amazing comeback. Or, as seems more likely, he might make an even bigger fool of himself. So, let's see what Tim can do, okay?
Why apologetics? Well, the Bible commands it.
And that really doesn't matter. Okay, yes, I know this video is being made for the people who already buy into the religious bullshit, but from the standpoint of a rational person, the fact that the Bible commands it means absolutely nothing. It's not a credible position to take. But these are not credible people, so that's hardly a surprise. Once you're sold on the religious stupidity, all critical scrutiny goes right out the window. You lose the ability to step back and realize just how asinine all of these bald assertions actually are. Luckily, we're not that gullible, so we're going to point out all of these abject failures. Somebody has to, after all. Might as well be us.
Apologetics is not optional. Every follower of Christ is instructed, commanded to be an apologist.
Sure. What other way is there to sell your religious mind poison to an increasingly skeptical world? And as I pointed out previously, it's convenient that STR makes a living by selling apologetics courses and books and other garbage, right? So, of course, they're going to insist that apologetics isn't optional. It's how they put food on the table.
You might be thinking, well, where does it say that? Well, I'm glad you asked. Let me give you a few verses to back this up. Probably the most often cited passage comes from the Apostle Peter. He writes, "In your hearts, honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for the reason for the hope that is in you. Yet do this with gentleness and respect." It's 1 Peter 3:15.
But you notice it says to do so when someone asks. It doesn't tell you to be an asshole and run around trying to force your beliefs on others. Now, from personal experience, I honestly can't think of a single time that anyone ever came up to me out of the blue and asked me why I believed in God. I don't remember anyone ever asking me that, actually, regardless of circumstances. Yet, I engaged in apologetics for other reasons, which I'm pretty sure Tim will get to in a minute. It was never sitting passively by and waiting to be engaged. It was always going out and pushing my beliefs on others. In retrospect, I'm sure I was an obnoxious little shit. It's too bad, but the religious just don't recognize that until it's too late.
The Greek word translated defense there is apologia. It's used 8 times in the New Testament and literally means a formal defense or reasoned argument for one's position.
Too bad you have none. I think that's a very important distinction. The religious think they have good arguments, but in reality, all they really have are just ad hoc rationalizations. Now, we've talked about this before. These are not good reasons to believe a given position. These are the excuses that people who already believe in that position give to attract others to their position. These are never the reasons that they themselves adopted their beliefs. They're just not. Absolutely no one out there started believing in God because they heard the Kalam cosmological argument. Religious beliefs are all about emotional appeals, not intellectual arguments. In an increasingly rational world, the religious are finding themselves completely outgunned.
My favorite passage on this subject comes from Paul. He says, "For the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but have divine power to destroy strongholds. We destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, and take every thought captive to obey Christ."
Seriously, does that make you think that even at the time of the writing of the Bible, you had rational people telling the religious that they were just nuts? This was before Christians were in power and weren't just making arguments. They were out and out killing heretics. They had nothing then, and they have nothing now. It's amazing how little things actually change.
Did you know that there are arguments and lofty opinions that are raised up against the knowledge of God?
Yes? Yes, I knew that. Because those are the only rational positions that one can take. Of course, these people wouldn't know rationality if it bit them. To them, feelings and emotions and getting that dopamine hit in the brain, that's all they care about. They simply aren't interested in anything else. It's why they spend all of their time listening to an ancient book of primitive mythology and believing in imaginary father figures in the sky. I know, right? Who would have thought?
And your job is to destroy them. The arguments and opinions, not the people.
Too bad Christians have gone straight for destroying the people every time they've had the political, military, and social power to do so, right? Because that pretty much describes the history of religion. Preach peaceful conversion right up until you have the power and enough swords to do it by force. Christianity is absolutely no different. History proves it is so.
Paul also tells the church at Philippi that they are all partakers with him of grace, both in his imprisonment and in the defense and confirmation of the gospel, Philippians 1:7.
He still isn't getting to the reason that we, or I, did it back in the day, which I actually find kind of surprising. Matthew 28:19 reads, "Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit." You'd think he'd use that one because it's pretty bloody obvious. But then again, nobody said STR was smart, so...
Similarly, Jude, he says that it was necessary for him to write appealing, to contend for the faith that was once for all delivered to the saints. So as we've seen, God commands apologetics.
Well, your silly book does. You haven't proven that God exists or commanded anything, which is really the point. You believe it for emotional reasons. You rationalize that it says something that you like in a book of mythology that you favor, and therefore, it's just got to be true. It's why you don't talk to the skeptical, because we'll just point out that all of your ideas are emotional and none stand up to any rational scrutiny. But who needs that?
Brain and brain! What is brain? It is controller. is it not?
Therefore, those who refuse to make a defense or answer each person or contend for the faith are disobeying God's command. And that alone for the Christian should be reason enough.
And conveniently, we've got a bunch of books to sell you that will tell you exactly how to do that. Get your credit cards ready. Operators are standing by.
So why apologetics? Quite simply, the Bible commands it.
That's still not a good reason to believe it, though. The Enuma Elish, well, that commands things too. You don't take that seriously. So does the Quran. You ignore that. So does Dianetics, I suppose. You just don't pay attention. Why would you? Those other books just don't make you feel good. They don't push a narrative that you've been programmed from birth to accept. This isn't about speaking truth. It's about creating a cult. That's all any of this actually is. It's trying to make everyone around you just like you so that you feel good about holding a majority position. If everyone believes, well, it's gotta be true, right? The whole idea is asinine, but this is religion we're talking about, so what else is new? STR is out to make a buck, and they're relying on people's natural adherence to their big book of multiple choice in order to get them to hand over their hard-earned cash. This is how they operate. I trust no one is surprised.